We're here with Mr. Warren Huart.
Who?
You. Did I pronounce it right?
You did, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I
Good.
wasn't being facetious. I was just like, who's that?
Who is it? It's this guy right here.
Where is he?
He's everywhere. That's
I just got to look at that thing. Yeah, you can ask me about that.
Yeah. What do you want to do
You
that?
tell me.
So, yeah, well, that's a nice segue. That happened organically. So
Yeah.
you had a chance to check out the More You unit.
Yeah, I did,
What were your
yeah.
thoughts about it?
I think the idea is brilliant. I was with Joe Carroll. Where is Joe? Joe Carroll. I think he did a runner. Well, I think, Stevie Wonder was just round the corner about 2 seconds ago. So everybody left to go and see Stevie Wonder,
Right.
which is quite understandable. I did too.
Right.
No, look, it's a great idea. It really is. It's interesting, though, because I get asked the same question now that we're nearing the end of day 3 by everybody. And the question is, what have you seen that's new, interesting, and actually inventive? And so far, I've said nothing. Because, but what I do like at the moment is hardware manufacturers are starting to incorporate software so that people don't have to buy third-party stuff.
Right.
You noticed a lot of that stuff? It's really good. But this actually is interesting, do something different idea.
Right.
And it's surprising it's taken so long for somebody to think of it. So what you've got, and I've only been tipped to this for about 20 minutes ago, is there's a master unit. They're connected with what looks like an AES EBU style cable, like an XLR cable, digitally from one to another, and controlled from the master, and each individual musician will get the ability to control their mix, but also because it's in situ, meaning I'm out in the live room, I'm playing electric guitar, my amp's down there, the mic goes straight into the unit itself and then digitally into here. So I think it's a really cool idea. I think, you did this, Joe? Single-handedly? It's all you? He said yes.
He's inventive. He's an inventive guy.
Yeah.
And he's been in the field, so knows the problems that come up and the challenges.
Yeah.
Even the cable reduction, the amount of cables it saves, like where one unit can power a bunch of other ones.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I also like this sort of idea of limiting the amount of gear you need.
Amen.
Because it's sort of like all in one, the ability to have mic pre's, converters, reduction in cables, etc. There's something I love about, I know, you and I probably have exactly the same musical taste. I think we do. We
do.
We talk about, like, Ronnie James Dio era Sabbath actually being, kind of the best. Who said that? I love the first Black Sabbath album. It's amazing. But Heaven and Hell,
Right.
it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
My point is like, you don't have to toe the party line all the time. It doesn't have to be just because everybody else tells you it's right. And I think as much as I love analog equipment, and I do, there's nobody in this world that loves analog equipment more than me, I do want to see innovation.
Right.
Because I don't feel like if you're a 13-year-old now who's just discovered some amazing album and it makes you want to do music just like you and I did, I don't know if you necessarily have to learn not redundant things, but things that are just going to sort of like take you down a little bit of a rabbit hole, when really modern technology allows you to use all that information, use all of that ability now in a much quicker and easier way.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, to just keep moving forward. And, each new generation comes along. My kids were at Best Buy the first time, my daughter, and she's trying to swipe on the flat screen TVs. And I go, oh, that's where she's starting from. Like, it's a screen. Don't you
Right.
just touch swipe? And so, yeah, to really take that and go, okay, we have all this information. Let's take what's good about it. And then if we can simplify something, now let's move on. And, you being in this industry, you have the era you came up in, which we love, the vinyl, the analog, all that. It's awesome. But practical and like real world right now, what is really moving this thing forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation 1,000 times about plugins. Does a kid need to have an emulation of an LA2A? Do they need to have 47 different types of compressor, or should they just buy a plugin that has all of those kinds of sounds available to them without having to understand or read a novel to know what it is. It's like, I want people to have tools that allow them to be creative. And what I like about this, I haven't yet used it, everybody. I've only known about it for a short period of time. But what I like about the principle of this is, like you say, the uncluttered idea, the simplicity of it, the less need for equipment and cabling and everything. And the fact that I think every musician in the room is going to feel empowered. But it's also interesting because it means that it's encouraging people to play together in a room. Woohoo!
Wow. Now there's an old school idea that's worth keeping.
There's an old school idea. It's definitely worth keeping. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and we talked to the guy, someone who's front of house for Filter, and Filter goes on tour with Rob Zombie and Alice Cooper and Ministry, and they're the first band on. They get no sound check. They get a 15-minute setup time, and he's looking at it going, wait, so you mean everybody can just plug into one of these and chain it? We don't even need to involve the monitor guy, and we can be set up in like 5 minutes, have our in-ears, run a line out to the front of house, and we're done. And it's sort of like the light bulbs are going off. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's a great idea. More power. I hope that it does well enough to keep going and be refined and become something that's pretty standard. I hope Joe's got some strong patents on this.
Yeah. I think so.
Did he hear me? I said, Joe, I hope you have some strong patents on this. You do? Okay, good. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So
what else do you want to talk about? Heaven and Hell, Black Sabbath,
right? Yeah.
James
So
Dio.
the side 2 starts off with Slipping Away, and okay. Anyway, let's talk producing just for a bit.
Sure, let's do it.
Generally, for someone that doesn't know what a producer does, and I meet a lot of musicians and guys in bands that don't really know what a producer does.
Right.
They think that the guy in town who has Pro Tools is a producer, right?
Sure.
So what is a producer's kind of range of jobs for someone who doesn't know what that is?
Oh, it's such a great question. The best answer I've ever heard, and I can't remember who said it, but the best answer I've ever heard is a producer is like a film director. Because people are much... It's why DIWs do so well. People are visual first. They really are. Obviously, we have our 3 senses, and visual seems to be dominant, let's be honest. And so if you equate it to that, let's talk about some archetypal kind of directors. Tim Burton. What is Tim Burton about? It is about how it looks. He builds a world. He builds everything, the costumes, everything. And I've heard him interviewed, and he said, I wouldn't know a good script if it hit me in the head.
Wow.
So he's all about the visuals, and then he relies on other people. Then you've got somebody like a Shakespearean actor like Kenneth Branagh, for anybody who knows who that is. And he is all about the script and nothing else. He's all about the actors' performances. He wants to get the most out of them. And when you watch his movies, you think to yourself, oh my God, this is like, he brought out this amazing scene out of this moment. So you've got these 2 extremes. Well, that is basically what production can be like as well. You can get the Rick Rubin kind of conceptual, I've done months of pre-production with Rick and the Chili Peppers, and Rick would come in and go, I really like that, but I want it to be more Duran Duran. And so Flea starts playing like octaves, and then it sort of like throws a little bit of a spanner in the works. And then there are other guys. I remember, what are they called? I just want to die, put your arms around me, baby. What was that about?
Sugar Ray?
Sugar Ray. They were at about a similar period of the Chili Peppers. They were in my studio, and they were doing, they were working with David Kahn. And David is like the opposite. You're jamming, and David's like, whoa, what's that? What did you just play? And you play the beat, and he records it, and then he goes back and builds a loop with it. And then you're jamming some more. He's like, well, what was that guitar part? Oh yeah, and then he flies it in. And then he's like a 5th member of the band. So he's like sitting there, and he's helping to build the tracks. He's helping with the arrangement and the co-writing and everything. So that's really the thing with production, is it's so vast. Sometimes it is, well, Dave Jordan, my old friend, we both know and love Dave Jordan. He has the best line for it, or the best phrase, where he just said to me once when we were making a record, he's like, sometimes you've got to rewrite the song change the key, change the tempo, change everything about it. And other times you just got to get out of the way of the band and help them make a great recording. And the skill, I think, for any great producer is knowing when to use your skills. And there is a place for a style, of course. If you're a great modern metal producer, there is a place for it, and there is work for it. But if you really, really want to work, you've got to be a George Martin, you've got to be a Rick Rubin, which means you've got to be genreless. You've got to be able to do, Dixie Chicks and, Toxicity. You've got to be able to do those two extremes. You've got to be able to do, Magical Mystery Tour and Blow by Blow by Jeff Beck. You've got to be able to understand, all these different genres. And I think that is really the modern way, because now that we have this incredible technology where any idea that you imagine can actually be done, you do need a high skill set. You need to understand your DAW. You need to know every single trick so that you don't actually have to think about things.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a having, as you're saying, the kid that has the Pro Tools or the whatever the DAW is, it's definitely a good start to being a producer. But,
right.
Yeah.
A whole other range of stuff. Because Jay Rustin said to me in a conversation one time, he goes, well, it's just all you need is an opinion. And I go, okay. I mean, Andy Warhol produced Velvet Underground. Okay, so yeah,
sure.
You could say that, but there really is, much more to it. I think to do it well, right?
Yeah, I know what Jay was saying, so you're right. But at the same time, if you're doing like he does a lot of modern rock, it's probably, maybe it starts to become formulaic. I do know people that are making consistent, Howard Benson makes consistent, great, heavy rock records and rock style records. And if I was in one of the bands that style of music, he would probably be my number one choice for a producer.
Right.
No two ways about it. And I also have a lot of respect for Benson because you and I both know where he came from. He came from, in the 80s, working 100 hours a week, working with every single baby band that was trying to get signed doing metal. And he did album after album after album. And now it seems like, it's so rote and easy to do. Yeah, it's because he's paid his dues time 1,000.
Right.
But I think ultimately, whatever your DAW is, just know it backwards so that you aren't just sitting there trying to figure out how to do something, so that you can take that creative idea that either you have or your artist has, obviously, and do it in the quickest way possible. But it's interesting, you see, when I interview somebody like Ken Scott, as we're both huge fans of, obviously, yeah, Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, you name it. When I interviewed him and I asked him anything technical, he's like, I don't remember. And he doesn't not remember because he's old and doesn't remember. He doesn't remember because to him it wasn't what was important about what he was doing.
Right.
It was like, Bowie wanted to do this, this, and this, so I had to facilitate it. I remember asking Jeff Emmerich about those, the D19s, those overly priced hipster kind of, AKG mic. That Warm have just done a really good recreation of, quite frankly. But, I said to him, why did you use those mics? Because they're not, amazing. They're not bad.
Right.
They're basically AKG's version of this. Before this existed, just an inexpensive dynamic mic. I said, why'd you use it? And he goes, because it was plugged in.
Right.
Because John Lennon, Jack will tell you this, I'm sure he has, John had ideas and he wanted them recorded. He wasn't like, well, let's go and audition 3 different mics and see which one's best for the situation. And I don't know if the tape stock is right. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like, no, I want the idea down. So understand the gear you have, know it inside and out, and remember the most important thing is the idea and the creativity.
Yeah. And talking about the mindset of someone in that room, in that recording studio, whether you're, producer or like working with Jack Douglas on something, and really just focusing on serving that song and getting that song. And so you might be dealing with an artist who's 16, first time in the studio, nervous, scared, super uncomfortable. And then you might be dealing with someone in a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band who's been
Ace, that we both have worked with.
Okay, say, or who's been in the studio a million times, and they're cranky and they just don't wanna.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you shift those gears and keep your ego out of the way and just kind of say or do whatever you have to get to that place?
Great question. I would say the best answer for that, honestly, is distraction. I love distraction. It's one of the best tools of what we do. It doesn't mean that you have to be Andy Kaufman meets Robin Williams, but having a bit of fun, and I don't mean like, well, here's a joke. I just mean taking the pressure off can be absolutely amazing. For every record that somebody tells me, you know, and I've got great stories that I've experienced and people have told me about an artist like in pieces crying and doing this performance, and then I can tell you 1,000 which are the opposite. Quite often when an artist, as you're pointing out here, is cranky, tired, doesn't want to be there, or completely terrified because it's the first time ever in the studio, you need to get them out of that moment.
Right.
And sometimes that's just like, I mean, I'm stupid anyway, you know, I'm foolish and silly, and I'm always, you know, little nerdy, you know, I think everybody who loves music is. We're all, you know, like we went on a tangent about Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, you know, what's that got to do with what we're talking about? We could probably do that for another hour.
Part two,
yeah. But my point is like you take them out of that zone and just let them actually, you know, relax and be in the moment. Distraction is really, really good for that. And so, and also knowing, I talked about this yesterday. I was doing a talk, and it was wonderful because Paula Salvatore was there. So she was like doing Paul McCartney stories and like, you know, all the different Capitol artists. And the story I told was about working with Steven Tyler on an Aerosmith record, and he was working more hours than God sends. He was coming in at 10 a.m. in the morning till 12 or 1, something like that, then going off and filming American Idol, and then coming back at 7 and working till midnight. And we were doing that 5 days a week, all during the series of X Factor.
Wow.
And then he'd come in on the weekends as well.
And he's what age at this point?
He's 68 then.
Doing that, okay.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, he's 70. I think he might be coming at 80 this year. But
yeah.
Yeah, so at that point, he was 68 years old, and he was working, 15 hours in a day.
Right.
And also having to be multiple different kinds of people. Camera guy, hey, I'm on American Idol. And then, like, taking it seriously, all these different kinds of stuff. And I realized after 1 or 2 days of doing all this vocal tracking, that nobody actually told him he was doing a good job, because he's Steven Tyler. Nobody needs to tell you you're great. I mean, you know, you've sold 100 million albums. You know, no, he's a human being like everybody else. And it was like day 3, we were tracking. We got to the end of the night. It's like midnight. We just finished the vocal. Sounded great. He did an amazing job. And I said that. I just said, that was awesome. That was great. Love that second verse. Love that thing. You know, pointed some stuff to him. And he just had this huge grin.
Right.
And it's not because it came from me. It could have come from you. It's just the fact that, like, human beings are human beings. So we have to remember that we all get nervous. We all get overwhelmed. We all that. Just try to remember what it's like to be in that situation. Right. You know, and it can also be empowering, because then you can remember that somebody's come and hired you to do the job, and you can get yourself back out of that fear that you have as a producer and engineer, and realize you also, you know, they're there. They've hired you, so maybe own that a little bit more and not be quite so terrified yourself. But distraction's the way. I love being silly. I will. If I'm trying to get another take out of somebody, I'll be like, hey, let's do another one for the kids, and then you've done it with me. Let's do the kids. Let's do one for the kids in Chile. Let's do, you know what I mean? It just gets sillier and stupider, and then they start making up things to say, and the whole time what you're doing is taking them away from being like, oh my God, did I do that in time? I don't know if it was in tune. You know, nothing worse than having a singer who's thinking about whether they're in time or in tune. You know, like, right. And it starts to sound like everything is like this and beep. You know.
Well, and I've told a lot of musicians, you know, every time, and I, you know, do a session with you, I can see you guys through the glass, and you're like, yeah, give us a second here, we got a thing, and in my head it's going, Matt sounds terrible today. Do we have anyone? Can you call Greg Bissonette? Because it's like you just imagine
Matt Chamberlain.
There's right, yeah.
Victor and Drizzo.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. And so like, the musician is thinking the worst possible things when there's that silence, right?
Cameron's really good at that. Where are you, Cameron? He was here earlier. Cameron actually does the talk back. He uses Sound Radix plugin. What's it called? We just were seeing them. The the talkback plugin, you know, that when you press record or play, it mutes the Mutamatic.
Right.
He uses that. He keeps it on the whole time. So basically, as soon as the track stops, the musician hears the whole room live.
Oh, that's very kind.
It's very kind, very smart. I mean, Cameron is a great producer, and he also has probably been beaten up. You know, he did how many Motorhead records?
Yeah, right.
Like 12 Motorhead records or something. I know he did the last 6 in a row, and he mixed all of that live stuff and remastered it. I mean, you know, if Lemmy is out there, you know, God rest his soul, if Lemmy's out there smashing away on the bass, and you go silent on him for 3 minutes, you know, basically it's not going to happen.
Right,
So
right.
he probably learned the hard way. He's done Social D records, Pennywise. I mean, he's working with bands that are like, they want to know, and they don't want to be like. So I like that. I try to keep it down, keep the button down. I've got the foot switch, you know, under the console, you know, all those things. Try to involve the musician, and don't, you know, because sometimes it's just because somebody's frickin' wants to make a coffee order, you know, and
right.
You're sitting there thinking, oh my God, they hate my part, when really it's like, where can we get like a really good latte? You know what I mean? Not too foamy, you know.
Yeah. So a 10-minute discussion on coffee beans, and then
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah. So, want to just touch on an engineering question? I'm sure you get this one a lot.
You should do more of these. You're better than most people that actually interview me.
Thank you. What's the most common? Now I'm in my head. Okay. What's the most common engineering mistake you see from young engineers, or tracks that you get, and you're like, this is it phase? Is it low end? Is it?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. The most common mistake is not being fearless.
Just playing it safe.
Yeah, it's like worrying, like reading some forum or listening to some friend who's like, oh my God, you can't do this, you can't do that, and blah 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 blah. And then you get the tracks. I got a record once from Ben Wysocki, as he says. From the Fray. He sent me a record that he had produced and recorded, and it was really nice. The problem was, it was really nice.
Right.
It was like I put it up on fader, and it was like sing ding 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 boom chap boom chap, and it was just like it's supposed to be a freaking rock band. Nobody was like pushing anything. Everything was like in time and in tune and everything. And I called up Ben, and he's like, well, let me put you in contact with the engineer, you know. And I was trying to be really nice, but you have to be, you know, people can get very touchy, but this was, you know, Ben wanted his engineer to do a better job. They'd used all my miking from the Fray studio. I'd left it all up. They'd never taken it down.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can this sound so tame? How can it sound so nice and pretty? And he's like, well, I didn't really like the API pre's, and I didn't like the way it was like pushing, and my head's like, what? And he's like, so we've got all these Grace preamps, and no disrespect to Grace, but he was like, and everything was like the gain, like at least 10 dB away, about ever overloading. It was never ever going to add any coloration.
Right.
It was so clean. And also all I did was just basically put it back through my console and smash the schnizzle out of it, so it had some personality.
Right.
And I think that there's so much talk of like, linear phase, distortion, saturation, clip, bloody, all this stuff that people talk about constantly, so that everybody is afraid to do anything wrong.
Right.
And they won't commit. They won't get a sound that's just like explosive and exciting, you know. So that's the first thing when I'm getting tracks to mix, is I think I'm sent them to mix because they're just not recorded badly. They're recorded safely and uninterestingly.
Yeah.
And then as far as, I just want you to commit. I want you to have fun. Oh, I'm seeing her. Barry Rudolph, ladies and gentlemen. I saw everybody looking up there saying, who's more interesting that we missed?
Right. What's the score of the game? So, boring is the first mistake, kind of.
Uninspiring, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. And then how about, is there a technical mistake that you see people, they just don't fundamentally understand?
All right, here's a really silly one. Okay, and I think this is a music school thing that I've seen a lot with assistants and interns. And now I try to head it off at the pass when I've got a young guy or girl who's helping. I'm like, I don't care if it clips a couple of times. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if the vocal, the guitar, the bass, whatever, the drums go down and it goes red light, 10 seconds later, red light, I don't care. So what? It clipped 5 times. They're like, but when I was at school, they said you should never clip. Because what will happen is, I've had it happen to me. I'm like tracking, and suddenly the snare drum disappears. And the assistant thinks that he should be clicking it down because it clipped twice. And what he doesn't understand is like, I am pushing that mic pre really hard to get it to sing, to get it to sound great. And now the whole sound has changed because for 2 nanoseconds, it went clip. But that's what my teacher told me at school. We should never clip. No, you must have watched like mixed breakdowns with people who know what they're doing, have been doing this for years. And what's always the comment underneath? I can't believe how like the volume meters are pinned and it's all these red lights. I was told not to do that. It's like, yeah. And then being afraid to EQ. Don't be afraid to EQ. Just because, you know, there's somebody on YouTube shows you there's a phase shift when you boost and cut. It's always been there. Every record you've loved has always had somebody aggressively EQing it. And it looks like there's phase shift, but what does it actually sound like? It's like Harrison actually have just brought out this channel strip where they're very proudly saying that you can boost frequencies, and when you high pass or low pass, it will actually cause a phase shift, which will give you a little bit of a resonant frequency. We love that. That's how Dave Jordan got his guitars on When Allison Changed to sound so mathematically huge, is because he basically went and boosted and cut at the same frequency, so he got this like little pip. So it's got a low end bump, a little high end bump, and then it goes like this.
Right.
It's like a little like fits perfectly in there, and it is a phase issue caused by using the EQ aggressively on the SSL. But that's half of the reason why we like that guitar stuff. But if you were to do that and show it on YouTube, you'll get 50 comments of people going, I can't just show the phase shift. It's like, what did it sound like? So I think the biggest thing is like, be fearless, have some fun, be aggressive in your EQ and compression stuff. And if you're a little terrified, print a DI and reamp it.
Yeah, and use your ears.
Use your ears is the number one, yeah. There you go. He just surmised the whole talk. Use your ears. Thank you.
No. So now I want to talk about the education side.
The education?
Education. I can't, the amount of access that you've given people to studios, to other professionals thinking, records, techniques, like it's immeasurable. It's huge.
Thank you.
It's huge. It's huge. And so when did this, and I remember, coming to sessions and you'd be like finishing up a video. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you working on? But can you tell me like where that idea came from and kind of the reason behind it?
Well, it started off as logical. My wife noticed that people always hit me up and ask me questions. And that's been like my whole unbelievable life. I don't know why it is. And I actually have no problem with it. I suppose it's just because I like people. I also don't mind. I think you might be this as well. I think a lot of musicians, we're introvert extroverts, yeah?
Yeah, right.
Like I bet you can be the center of attention and then go and hide in a dark cupboard and you're happy in both situations.
Some days putting on shoes is terrifying, but then once I go out, I go, oh, that was great. I gotta do that more. Yeah.
Introvert, extrovert.
Yep.
I think that's all great artists. Look at Freddie Mercury.
Right.
On stage, was there a better performer on stage? No. Don't even try to argue with me on that one. I mean, the greatest live performer of all time. I don't think there's a person alive who doesn't think that Live Aid is the ultimate live performance. And so here he is, this incredible live performer. Then you see him interviewed when he's sober and he's like, yes, darling, yes, I really like, it's just,
right.
Boom, it's boom, boom, boom. And I've always felt like I like connecting with people on things that I love. Don't ask me about a question I have no real idea of. But if it's something I love, I can be like, yeah, you know. We were walking back to the car last night, and somebody didn't stop me. I was like, we were walking. I was like, just walk with us, and started asking me about Johnny Marr's guitar sound. Started asking me about, I want to buy a JC120. How do you get the distortion sound from that period? And I'm like, yeah, you know, all those guys, John McGeoch, you know, one of the greatest guitar players ever lived that nobody really knows about. John McGeoch, I saw him play live at the Armory Show from Stuart Jobson from the Skids, and I was like, JC120, Marshall Half Stack, AC 800. I said the metal guys in the early 80s did not use the ACM 800s, they used JMPs. But all the indie guys, for the heavy sound, use the 800, and for the clean sound, use the JC120, and then just add an A/B switch, and that's how that was the sound of all those great guitar players in late 70s through to mid 80s, and it was just so much joy to talk about that. You know what I mean? So the idea of doing the channel was like, you know, my wife says to me, "That's you. Why don't you try and take it to a bigger audience?" And YouTube really. It's an interesting one because we didn't monetize for a longest time, didn't even put ads on the videos. Only because when I first went on YouTube, I used to hate having to watch a bleeding ad to learn something. The problem is, as soon as you start talking about other people's music, you have no control over it anymore. They take the advertising revenue. So, you know, the more we started like using examples and playing other people's music, now we have ads on everything. It is what it is. It's totally fine and all this stuff. But to me, it was organic. It was my wife pointing out that that's who you are, why don't you try it? And we did. And it just sort of grew from there.
It's giving her props.
But, you know, I love it. I really do. And as long as I'm not actually physically asleep, you will get a rational answer from me.
No, I think it's a great answer to any question, which is like, you're going to be talking about this stuff anyway. If someone's like, hey, man, what about this tube versus, you're going to be all into that conversation. Why don't you just do this in front of everybody?
Yeah, I also, you know, I'm selfish, just like everybody else. As long as it hits a point of something I love, I'm okay.
Right.
And when people ask me, it's not a number one question, but it's a top 5 question that I get asked over the years. And you probably all have thought this question at one point. How do you work on music you don't love? I get that all the time. And then other people say, how do you work with artists that aren't that talented? And I always say, I make it so I love it. I make it so I love it. And to be honest, you know, you play a lot of instruments as well. I like when somebody comes in and they've got a half-decent song idea and they're a fairly good singer, but they need the song to be rearranged. They maybe need some co-writing. They need us to play on it, all that stuff. That's good. That fulfills a lot of things that I love. So I didn't get into this to be easy. I got into this because I loved it. For me, I don't know what your album was, and everybody knows, but my album was A Night at the Opera. My dad bought it for me for Christmas. I was really little, far too young to understand, and I just was like, this is amazing. And I remember looking at, you know, the inner sleeve with all these guys with long hair, and I remember reading it says no synthesizers, and right. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it must be cool. Right. And then, of course, I found out that everything I was hearing, all those kind of like brass section, clarinets and everything, was all Brian May on guitar. Right. You know, and I loved it. You know, Good Company and Seaside Rendezvous, and then of course, Prophet Song, and, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously. And to me, it was like, so I fell in love with music, you know, to be blunt, before I knew anything about girls. Right. You know what I mean? So right. I didn't get in a band to be like, hey, man, I'm in a band. You know, I just was like, I loved music. Yeah. And I think doing what we do, we're junkies. We're just trying to relive that all the time, that feeling. Well, yeah. What was your record?
Kiss Alive 2. Opened it up, Love Gun stage, they're on risers, smoke, sparks, dudes looking cool. And to your point, yeah, before girls. So I go, I don't even know what this is, but when those risers come down and the sparks stop, I want to be there in that thing, that world, whatever that is. I knew they played music, but just the whole thing, that's all I wanted. And I've never had that feeling before or since about anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so my wife asked me, why do you have 7 copies of this record. It was Cheap Trick Live at Budokan.
Yeah.
And I go, well, this one's a US promo. This one's a UK version yellow vinyl. But the truth is, I just want to keep buying that record. So if this is a version I don't have, I get to go to the counter, plunk it on the counter, pay the guy, and go home with a copy of this record. And so, like you said, being the junkie, like, let's just keep doing that thing again and again and again and getting that feeling, you know?
Yeah.
And I love what you said. Again, I just want to like reiterate on what you said about why you do the channel. Because I think so many musicians and probably people in general, like, why am I here? What's my thing as a musician? What's my voice? Or as a person, what am I doing? And this is one of your things is, you know, produce like a pro. But again, well, you're like, well, I like this. This is exciting. And I'm just going to now share this with the world. So again, little message. If you have something you're passionate about, just share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with other people, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we are in a very fortunate place that we get to do what we love. Now, it is a lot of bleeding work.
Yeah, and it can be scary, the ups and downs.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
It can be financially rewarding and financially stressful as all HELL. I mean, yeah. But there's nothing better than kind of hanging out, like guys like us. Like, there's five of us hanging out. Wonderful. Yep. Absolutely amazing. Like I said, I'm not joking. Let's talk about heaven and hell. It's just like, you know, Mob Rules. I know you're a Mob Rules fan as well, which I do like, but Heaven and Hell came at a time in my life that was just like, oh, Neon Nights. First time I heard that guitar riff, I was just like, wow.
Yeah. And Bill.
Yeah.
That was the last one with Bill, too.
Yeah, amazing.
So, thank you for taking the time. It's nice to talk to you on or off a mic, as always, you know. And we would go do sessions, and he'd say, oh, you know, get here at 10. I'd show up at 10, and we'd talk about World War II and, you know, Sabbath and guitars and family. And then it's like, should we do some recording? Yeah.
And then we usually, no, not schnizzling you, we'd probably do 1 or 2 takes, and then we'd be done.
Right.
Yeah. The thing is, when you're at the level that Matt's at, and I'm sure many of you here as well, it's like, it is about just kind of getting in the zone. You know, the great session players, by the way, are not the ones that can do the hemi, demi, semi quavers and stand on their head and spin around and play bongos and gongs and all that kind of stuff. They're the ones that sound like they're in the band. And I think that is not said enough. I think because I don't think it benefits anybody. I think it benefits people to talk about, you know, there's one of the problems I have with music education, whether it be learning an instrument or learning the techniques to record, etc., is teaching those techniques to the nth degree. And I sometimes feel like when I'm watching videos of breakdowns of songs and the Lydian, Phrygian, Crygian, Mixolydian, you know, it comes across as a way of saying, I'm superior and I understand and you mere mortals don't. When the reality is, like, most of the music that we love was made by people who had a command of the knowledge that they had. And sometimes in, like, AC/DC, I'm looking at this fine young guitar player over there. Hi there. Who does a lot of great AC/DC stuff. I see him on Instagram.
There he is. What's up, buddy?
And you know, he'll attest to it. You know, some of the greatest songs, AC/DC songs, you know, TNT is E, G, A, G, A, G, E. And then what is the chorus? A, G, E, 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 E. So it's the same frickin' 3 chords. Just E. It starts on E, and then the chorus is A, G. You know, I mean, it's just like, and it's TNT. It's in a pantheon of best guitar rock songs ever.
Ever.
Yeah. And I don't think Angus and Malcolm and Bon Scott were thinking, Phil Rudd, thinking, you know, you should have gone to the Lydian.
They might go to the B for the chorus. Maybe. I mean, for the solo. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
There was a great quote in like 80 bloody blah blah, where Angus Young is being interviewed by, I don't know, Guitar Player, Guitar Magazine, one of the big magazines. And I bought the magazine. He was on the front cover. And he jokingly said, he goes, I am the only guitar player in the world that has made $1 million playing the same guitar solo on every song.
Right.
I love that. I mean, obviously we all know it's variations, but he's just saying the ideas I have and everything, I just repeat them, and they don't get old and boring. So I think it's like that's a thing that we need to sort of remember, is like limitations aren't a bad thing. Pushing the boundaries of your limitations and learning new things, don't get me wrong. Keep evolving, keep growing. But don't live in fear going, well, I saw this video and this guy's really clever and he was talking about like, think about the guy who's really clever and then go, well, wait, that really clever guy, has he actually written any of the songs?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's cut yourself some slack. Give yourself a break. You can do this. You really can. Just put your heart and soul into it, and you will succeed.
I don't think there's anything to follow up with that. That was
Good job.
great. Thank you. You guys, Warren Huart.
Matt Starr, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Starr.
Woo! Matt!